Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now a special Monday crime report. You know, we hear a lot about black-on-black crime. In fact, that seems to be the only kind of intra-racial violence that the white media talks about. Black on black. Apparently black people are the only ones who actually harm people in their own group, to hear the white media tell it. Politicians, pundits, and the police, they push that particular talking point all the time. Now, why does the white media only single us out for that? Because you've never heard the white media using a phrase like white-on-white crime, and neither does the police. Even in the case of the frequent mass shootings like what we see at churches like in Alabama the other day, or in schools like Sandy Hook, Parkland, or Columbine. Now, the usual talking point that's trotted out by the white media and the white supremacists in general is, well, that's because black people kill each other more than any other group. But is that true? Because a lot of these killings, there are no suspects that are caught. In the black community, we will regularly see a story where there was some random drive-by at an event or a concert, or some people were at a park and got shot at, or some group gathering, and then we'll read about how somebody began shooting at them and drove off, and the police claim they never found out who did it. But it probably was some gangbangers fighting over drug turf, or street punks wilding out. Black people found hanging from trees, but we're told these were suicides because the police said so. Black judges and activists found dead under completely suspect circumstances, and the police ruled these as suicides or otherwise declared there was no foul play. Black people would be found dead, or like in the case of Nipsey Hussle, they wound up being killed by some complete rando, and even the police themselves say they can't say who's doing most of these mass shootings in our communities, mainly because they don't actually catch whoever it is. They don't know, but they use innuendo and language deliberately meant to mislead you to conclude that any time there's one of these acts of egregious violence that takes place, you must automatically conclude it was black-on-black crime. We in the black media, however, have been telling you that a lot of these mysterious shootings and killings have not been random at all, and haven't even been committed by black people. Well, here's one example of what happens when the truth is actually found out. October 1st, 2020, 2 o'clock a.m. The Detroit Police Department had responded to a call about a burning Kia Sorento parked on Detroit's east side. They found a man, Takuyo Moore, dead in the back of the burnt-out car. After identifying the victim, the Detroit police then contacted police in Warren, Michigan, where the victim had lived with his girlfriend. About 10 a.m., only 8 hours after Mr. Moore's corpse was found, the Warren police went to the home of Moore's girlfriend, Isis Remsen. Takuyo and Isis were engaged to be married. Isis was essentially the stepmother to Takuyo's 6-year-old son, tai'raz Moore. Police got no answer at the door, and when they went into the house, they went down into the basement and discovered a scene right out of hell. They found both Isis Remsen and little tai'raz Moore dead from multiple gunshots to the head. They had both been murdered execution style. Somebody told them to turn around, get on their knees, and then just gun them down. The police chief said that only monsters or godless creatures would pull the trigger on a 6-year-old and execute a child. Now, when news of this broke, it shocked and horrified the community in Detroit. How could this have happened? Who would do such a thing? They didn't know who it was, but they were already jumping to conclusions, and the white media was more than happy to encourage them on that one. So-called community activists and the white media together were leading the charge to make it clear the black community must have done it. As reported by the Fox affiliate in Detroit on October 9th, 8 days after the slaughter, justice and change. That's what people gathered at a prayer vigil for 6-year-old tai'raz Moore were pushing for. The wheels of the former may already be turning. The latter, many here say, will begin with self-reflection. Self-reflection indeed. Words and sentiments that we never see from the white media after a white-on-white mass shooting, but let's continue. A vigil was held honoring the little boy who was murdered, as well as his father and the woman who would have been his stepmother. At this vigil, you had an activist named Zeke, who's with a group calling itself New Era Detroit, and Zeke gave us this pearl of wisdom. We are here today for nothing else but to look in the expletive mirror. because what is going on in our communities with these babies is completely unacceptable. One community activist, Ray Winans, who the white media says was a former gang member, was quoted as saying, "Before they walk a child down and execute a baby, bro, that right there is unacceptable." A man identified as Dr. C.A. Trick Mathis said, "At this point in the game, it is not black versus white or rich versus poor. It is wicked versus righteousness." Well, if a guy named Trick says it's not about black and white, then we can take that to the bank. Now, what needs to be remembered is that there was no suspect at this point. None of these people who were talking even knew who did it. The police claimed they didn't know who did it. They just made a vague statement that there was a person of interest, but they made real sure to keep that confidential. There were no leaks about it, and the white media wasn't turning over every stone to try to find any leads either. So naturally, the black community in Detroit blamed itself, as they were meant to, because the white media, the police, black celebrities, and activists are always pushing that black-on-black crime line. People just jump to conclusions because they've been conditioned to, and as we saw, the white media encourages this. And that's how we get people like Zeke and Trick telling us that this was our fault. We need to look in the mirror at what's going on in our community and that it's not a black versus white thing. Because a few days later, after the vigil where Trick and others, including a Detroit City Councilwoman, were telling the black community they need to look in the mirror, police revealed that they had arrested and were going to arraign then 37-year-old Nicholas Bahri for this triple murder. And you won't be surprised to learn that Nicholas Bahri has a criminal record long as your arm. He had been sentenced for larceny in 2006, then sentenced again for drugs in 2008, then sentenced for fleeing conviction, violating parole on multiple occasions. In fact, he had just gotten out of prison after serving a 7-year sentence for fleeing and eluding just 6 weeks before he murdered Takuyo Moore, Isis Remsen, and little tai'raz Moore. Now, the state didn't have to let Bahri out of prison. Even after 7 years, they could have held him, but they decided instead to do an evaluation to determine whether or not he was a danger. And surprise, surprise, they found that he should be released, even with his extensive criminal record. The timeline that was put together was that Takuyo Moore had been invited by Bahri to meet him at Bahri's parents' house where Bahri was living. At about 7:50 p.m. on September 30th, Moore drove his Kia Sorento to the Bahri residence, and that's where Bahri murdered him by shooting him in the head. Bahri then put Moore's corpse in the back seat. According to GPS data from the Kia and Bahri's own cell phone, Bahri had driven Moore's car around with his dead body in the back for a couple of hours after he had murdered him. Bahri then drove to the house where Isis Remsen and tai'raz Moore were at, arriving at about 10 p.m. on September 30th, and that was when he murdered Isis and little tai'raz. Bahri then ransacked the home, stealing a few items and leaving only a little after 11 p.m. He wouldn't be the only one to ransack the house. We'll get to that later. After the triple murder, Bahri then drove the Kia to a gas station on 8 Mile Road and filled a gas container with gasoline. A couple of hours later, the Detroit police got a call about the burning car. Police would search both Bahri's home computer and his cell phone and find that he had been on the internet looking for any stories about any burning cars. After the triple murder, Bahri began planning a spending spree. Watches, vacations, hookers, the works. The day after he murdered the Moore family, he took a selfie of himself holding a wad of cash. I think we all know where he got it from. This is what he does after he executes a 6-year-old child, shooting that child in the head 7 times. Bahri was finally put on trial and convicted on 3 counts of first-degree felony murder, 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, arson, mutilation of a body, and 7 firearm charges. He's set to be sentenced on June 29th. Now, when this crime was first made public, the black community was very open to say that we need to look in the mirror at ourselves. But nobody's saying that now, certainly not about Bahri's community. Neither his parents nor anyone from his community are saying that they need to look in the mirror. And the white media is not saying it either. Apparently, reflection isn't meant for everyone. It's just meant for black people, I suppose. Now, while I'm not going to cut any of the activists or other assorted self-interested hucksters any slack, the community can be forgiven for blaming themselves. After all, they've been conditioned by a hyper-aggressive white media propaganda campaign to internalize the white media's anti-black narrative and then to repeat it like a trained parrot. Repetition is indeed the mother of learning. Problem is, it's also the mother of indoctrination, too. You better stop simply accepting whatever the white media tells you and start thinking for yourself, especially when it comes to what they're saying about us. Now, the reason that this triple murder is so significant is because it's a case study that should get all of us to think a lot about these mass shootings and killings that keep happening in our community, and they never find a suspect, and yet we have the white media, the police, and certain activists telling us we need to look in the mirror if we want to find the suspect. This is why we as the black media keep telling you that when these mysterious drive-by killings and shootings occur in our communities and the police just never seem able to figure out who's doing all these hit-and-run shootings or committing all of these mysterious, heinous crimes, we better stop mindlessly repeating the white media narrative that it must be us. There's no way that the police don't know who a few of these unsolved mass shootings and all of these drive-bys are being done by. In fact, given the way that a lot of police, including police chiefs and commissioners, talk about the black community, it wouldn't surprise anyone at all to find that these mysterious unsolved shootings and killings were being done with the help of some people in law enforcement. And speaking of police involvement in crime, the Thug Patrol in Warren, Michigan still have over 200,000 of Takuyo Moore's belongings, which the police there chose to run off with as part of their quote-unquote investigation. Now, the Warren police didn't give a reason why they needed so much of Takuyo Moore's belongings. They just ran off with it. Now, of course, as I explained, when this atrocity was first committed, the police were safe and secure in the knowledge that there wasn't a suspect and most likely wouldn't be one. So, as we've seen with asset forfeiture and other state-sanctioned theft, when they steal from people, they're pretty sure that they'll never have to give it back. It just gets lost in the bureaucracy. But because the brutal murder of a 6-year-old made it where this story wasn't going to be swept under the rug, this wouldn't just fade from the headlines as just another alleged black-on-black crime. Now the mother of Takuyo Moore is suing the Warren police to reclaim the belongings of her murdered son, and the police are telling her they're not going to return his effects unless she first signs a waiver saying that she won't hold them responsible. I think we can assume that means she wouldn't hold them responsible for any lost or stolen items. The police ransack her murdered son's home when they know that his wife and his dead son's bodies are in the basement. They rob him in death, and now that they have to be accountable for it, they're trying to force his mother to let them off the hook. Clearly, Nicholas Bahri isn't the only criminal in this situation. Now, this crime does call for the black community to reflect, but not the way the white media said. We need to ask ourselves why we were so quick to blame ourselves when no one else did, at least not explicitly. We also need to reflect upon all these other shootings and killings that take place in our community that the police say that they just don't know who did it. Next time you see the white media talking about some shooting where there's no suspect, and you see some community activist or local politician saying the black community has to do better, you just remember this case. Because a hell of a lot of killings just like this happen, and if we do get to the bottom of it, we're going to find that it's not the black community doing a lot of this. And that's this week's special Monday crime report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones that the white corporate media choose to show to you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Loke Thies, John Harvin, James Stiles, Samantha Ellis, and Keith. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.